I think I was about 18 when I first joined the online dating community. One of my friends had convinced me to sign up since I had just gone through a terrible breakup. I was still technically in high school, but only about 2 months from graduation. As I was clicking through one of the dating sites on my phone, I came across someone who seemed decent looking and fairly normal from what I could tell based on his profile. It said he was the son of a local cop, so we'll call him Officer V. We'll call his son Ren. Ren had just moved in with his dad from Florida and was looking to meet new people. We chatted online for a while and then decided to meet up and go for a walk. We met up at a local ice cream shop and then walked around downtown getting to know each other. Now, off the bat after meeting him, I wasn't super into him, but I know nerves get the best of people, so I decided to give it another chance. I was a member of the marching band in high school, and we always did the local parades for Memorial Day and such. Well, Ren and I had been texting all day talking about meeting up for a picnic or such after I was done with the parades. When I told Ren we were just finishing up and that I needed to go home and get cleaned up before we went out, that's when things took a turn for the creepy. He insisted on picking me up at the end of the parade, and after 10 minutes of arguing, I finally convinced him that no, he would not pick me up and would in fact wait for me to change and get cleaned up. After I was done getting changed, I gave him my address and said he could come pick me up if he'd like. Not 3 minutes later, he was outside waiting. When I got into the car, I smelled something awful that can only be described as something rotting and dead. I'm a messy person, but I never let my car get that gross on the inside, much less let a date see it in that state. There were food wrappers everywhere, dirty laundry. It really looked as though this guy had been living out of his car. When I asked him what we would be doing for the evening, he said we're going out to dinner, but he wanted to show me something first. I live near the third largest national military cemetery in the US, and that's where this kid took me. I would have understood, being as it was Memorial Day, wanting to make a quick stop and pay respect to your family who passed who had served, but no, there was no paying respect. We drove through the cemetery and he pointed out every single grave that he was even remotely related to. To make matters worse, it wasn't just this one cemetery. We drove through 4 cemeteries. 4. When we left the last one, I thought the creepiness was over. Boy, was I wrong. We went back to his house, and I asked if we were still going to dinner, and he replied, "Yes, but I have to wait for my dad. He's taking us." I was a good kid, never got into too much trouble, but the thought of being stuck in a restaurant with a cop was just a little unnerving to me. Why hadn't Ren told me this in the first place? As we were sitting on the couch watching TV waiting for Officer V to come home, Ren decided that it was a good time to try and make a move on me. He leaned in to kiss me and attempted to say something cute before doing so, but I had immediately turned my face away because of that awful stench coming from this guy's mouth. I've dated smokers before, and cigarette breath really didn't bother me, but this was cigarette breath on steroids, and that's the only way I know how to describe it. Thankfully, moments later his father walked in and announced he was ready to go to dinner. After a few brief questions about my age, making sure it was okay for him to take me across state lines, we left for dinner. The entire meal, Ren did not say a single word. Instead, his father, Officer V, asked all the questions, and I really felt like I was being interrogated. Thankfully, dinner was short. After the meal, I texted one of my friends to tell her I needed a way out of this situation and to call me and pretend to be upset. It turns out, Officer V was dating her mother, so Ren knew who she was, quite well in fact. I told Ren I needed to go because my friend was really upset and needed my help. Ren downright refused to take me back to my car so that I could go alone, even though the only way to get to her house was to drive directly past mine, where my car was parked. After the argument ensued about him not taking me to my car, he dropped me off at her house, and I immediately jumped out of the car without saying goodbye or thank you. Thinking that Ren had gotten the hint that I was most certainly not interested, I thought I was in the clear. His tours of the cemetery and the refusal to take me to my car were huge red flags, so I knew he was not someone I wanted in my life. I blocked him on the dating site and deleted his number. The following weeks got progressively creepier. He would continually text and call me, even though he knew I would not answer. He would come to the baseball games I worked at and just watch me, and a few times I had to have the coach throw him out because he was bothering us. He called me once, and my friend answered my phone and blatantly told him I was not interested and to stop calling. He didn't get the hint. The calls and texts continued for weeks, and I would notice him drive by my house sometimes. I only ever ran into him once after that, at a local bar and pizza shop. I was at the bar with friends when I noticed him come in. As he came up behind me to talk to me, I turned my head and clearly ignored him and acted as though I had neither seen nor heard him. After a few minutes of waiting, he walked away, and I have not seen or heard from him since. My friend often tells me how creepy he still is, as her mother and Officer V are now married. Word is, Ren recently got married. I feel so bad for that poor girl, but I hope he isn't such a creep to her like he was to me. Ren, please, let's never meet again. I've sat here with this typed out for an hour debating if I should post this. Sorry if it's stupid and not creepy. This is my first post. First off, I call him the psychological stalker because he really messed with my head, depriving me of sleep and seriously terrifying me even to this day. I'll start at the beginning, 2011 to 2012. I had lived in Utah for several years, moved several times due to my dad's work and other circumstances that don't matter. My family is Christian. I am not, but I still attend their church because it makes my mom happy. I made a friend in the congregation who was a year younger than me, Zach. Zach was one of the realest people I ever met, and we got along very well. The summer was about halfway through. We spent almost every single night playing night games with people from the church. We all lived on the same street except for Zach, who lived up the very steep hill. Still not too far though. Nearing the end of summer, the night games slowed down and were now only once a week. The rest of the time I was hanging out with Zach at his house, only up the hill from mine. Enough distance for exactly 11 street lamps. One night, around 2 a.m., I was walking back when I saw a very tall man on the opposite side of the road from one of the street lamps, the faded light resting just out of reach of his feet. Totally dark. I couldn't see anything but that he was tall, very tall. I could only assume he was about 7 feet tall. I switched sides of the road so I was away from him. He turned as I walked past him to watch me. At this point, I remember my rule to always carry a knife on me. I reached in my pocket to make sure my trusty spring-loaded knife was in my pocket. Sure enough, it was. As I passed him, I got about 40 feet down the road from him, and he started walking behind me, keeping the distance of what I assume was about 40 feet. When I stopped, he did. He didn't get any closer than that. This totally creeped me out, but he didn't really harm me, so I disregarded it and went to bed, not telling my mom the next morning. The next day I told Zach what happened and hung out with Zach as normal, had night games and went to his house for a movie. When it ended around 1:30 a.m., I walked home again, this time relieved to not find the man standing there. I walked down the hill like normal, only to turn around with a creepy feeling, to find the man behind me the normal 40 feet away, opposite side of the road, switching sides back and forth so he never stepped under the street lamps. This continued for a week, 40 feet away, every time I walked home from Zach's house. On the Monday of the second week, he got closer. This started to really scare me. I told my mom after the second incident and decided to tell her again. She put it off like she does with most things, reassuring me that the neighborhood is safe, and if anything happened I could scream and our neighbors would charge out with guns. Another week later, he got closer, this time only 10 feet from me on the same side of the street as me, but switching sides of the road every time I passed under a street light as normal. This was the first time I ever got a look at him. His hat shadowed his face, and all I could see was his sunken-in cheeks. I stopped while he was on the same side of the street as me and turned around knowing he wouldn't get closer and asked him, Who are you? Forcefully. No response. I pointed my knife in his direction and said, I'm a Boy Scout. I've killed things with a knife and I won't have a problem stabbing a man I feel threatened by. All he did was sigh and stand there. The first sound I ever heard him make, a fucking sigh, and yet it gave me goosebumps and scared the shit out of me. I stepped forward to see him better, but he jumped back. I stepped another step and he took a couple back. I considered running at him but instead put my knife away and ran as fast as I could home, only looking over my shoulder once to see him wave at me as I ran. I got home and didn't sleep the entire night. I called Zach early the next morning and told him everything that had happened. He freaked out and said I needed to call the cops, but I refused and just tried to brush it off. That is when things got worse. He started appearing in midday. I would be outside skating or longboarding, far enough away where I couldn't see any details, and whenever I went towards him, he would turn and run away. I never got close enough to see who he was. This made me break down and freak out. Why the fuck was he doing this? Zach insisted we tell someone, but I stupidly refused. He stopped following me from Zach's house at night. Awesome, right? Wrong. So very wrong. This fucked with my mind. This absence scared me more than his presence. Where was he? Was he watching me? Is he near me? Is he going to grab me? Not knowing where he was more terrifying than ever before. Even now I'm shaking while typing this, just thinking about that night not seeing him. I didn't see him for 4 nights in a row and Zach convinced me he was gone. Weeks went by and I returned to my normal life. We moved houses across the main road from that house. Literally a 5-minute walk from the old house. Very close. Still walking distance to Zach. School started and winter came. Winter break started and I hadn't seen Zach in a while, so I called him up and we decided to hang out. The day went by as normal and I went back home. No stalker in sight. It got really hot in my room, so I decided to crack the window just a little, letting the cold air seep in. I only planned to keep it open for a minute or two. I turned around to face my bookshelf as I am a procrastinator and still hadn't unpacked my boxes of books. Then the single most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me occurred. I remember it so clearly. Wearing my Jack the Pumpkin King pajamas and Job for a Cowboy shirt, holding my favorite book, To Kill a Mockingbird, it happened. From behind me, outside the window, I heard a familiar sound. The sigh. My blood went cold. My heart stopped. I stopped breathing. I was paralyzed with fear. I quickly spun around, my eyes tearing up to see an evil smile with sunken cheeks I will never be able to get out of my mind. He ran away from the window with a laughter that echoes in my mind as I type this. I ran over and slammed my window shut. I screamed, and the next thing I remember is waking up on my floor, with my mom next to me saying she heard my window slam, a scream, and something hit the ground really hard. After that, I never saw him again. Years have passed and I still think of him. I check the locks on my doors and windows all the time. I have a gun near my bed and I have a knife in my pocket at all times. It all started when I was 15. I was going to a decent high school, and I was definitely going through my emo scene phase at the time and didn't hang out in the best of crowds. My angst-filled friends and I spent most of our school days ditching and getting drunk on the football field. We all thought we were such badasses. There was one person who stood out in particular, though. Fernando was a senior, or at least I thought he was, as I never saw him attending any form of class, and he lurked around my group of friends ever so often. His brain was completely fried from the endless amounts of acid and ecstasy he had taken, and nothing he said or did really made sense. He often stood emotionless, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, occupied in another drug-induced world. He never really came off too creepy though. He just slightly made our group a little uncomfortable, but he was easy access to the shrooms and weed we wanted, so fuck it. I have always been a rather introverted lady, too kind at heart to ever want to intentionally make anyone feel stupid or bothersome. So, once I got expelled from our high school in the middle of sophomore year for getting caught drinking for the 50th time on campus, I stayed in touch with Fernando. It wasn't a daily thing from what I remember, but only ever so often when I needed the hookup for weed. He'd catch the bus to my neighborhood and I would meet him behind some trees, and he'd linger for a bit after I insisted on getting back home after the deal was made. But of course, I still didn't find Fernando that creepy, or maybe I did, but I chose to ignore it. I have a poor memory, but I believe the last time I had ever seen him was when I was 16, nearly 4 years ago. I was in desperate need for a 20 sack, so I sent him a text and waited a few hours. When Fernando finally pulled up at the bottom of my hill in his friend's car, I was informed we were going to the apartment complex just across the street from my old high school, a safe area. I didn't have a weird feeling or anything. I went along with it. To my surprise, Fernando's friend simply dropped us off and drove away, leaving the two of us at an apartment complex alone. I didn't ask questions. Instead, I followed Fernando to a door and waited for a minute after he knocked a few times. No answer. Fernando mumbled something under his breath, and I started to panic as I followed him into the small laundromat that the complex had. I asked what was happening, and he told me we were just going to wait until his friend who was supposed to deal me the weed came home. Figuring he just wasn't there yet, I didn't really stop to think about why we were even in this tiny empty laundromat until I watched Fernando pull out a syringe. I leaped back and let out a shriek, and he said, sorry. I'm just gonna shoot this up really fast. You don't have to look." At this point, I was livid. I stormed out of the little room and sped walk towards the parking lot. I wasn't quite sure of where I was going until Fernando caught up to me. "Hey, where are you, going?" he asked, as if piecing together each word was the hardest thing in the world. I blew up. "What do you mean, where am I going? You just shot up heroin in front of me. Where is your friend that took us here? I want to go home." Fernando stared blankly at the floor and shifted his weight from foot to foot, awkwardly. I forgot to tell you. I don't really know that guy, and he can't really take you home," he mumbled slowly. I was seeing red. Fernando fucking tricked me into thinking his friend was simply dropping us off at his other friends so that I could get the weed and then go home. He tricked me into hanging out with him. I bet he even knew the guy in the apartment wasn't home, or maybe I was just naive, but looking back at it, I think I even asked Fernando through text if I had a ride home. He said yes. I didn't know what to do, so I ran. I ran down the street to the local college, as it occurred to me halfway there that I remembered seeing a bus stop there once. Good, I thought. I'll just use some of the money I was going to use for weed to catch the bus. My house isn't too far. Well, as if it was some sick joke, the bus stop was not running that day and there was not a bus stop anywhere nearby. At this point, Fernando had caught up to me and was mumbling some shit I couldn't make out. But what's new? "Use your phone, call everyone you know who has a car, and get me home." I said each word with a spit of venom. Fernando slowly took out his phone and fumbled with it for a few seconds as I started walking back in the direction I came from, arms crossed. I was furious. 30 minutes later, no luck. It was apparent Fernando was not going to find me a ride home, nor did he seem too eager to do so anyway. My grandmother did not know I had left my neighborhood, as I was grounded at the time, so I had to be back before sundown. Well, the sun was creeping towards the bottom of the sky, so I decided on my last possible option. I walked home. For 3 hours I walked all the way to my house. Now, by car it was not a far distance whatsoever, but the long, winding hill dragged on for what felt like hours. Want to know the worst part? The entire time Fernando followed 10 feet behind me. He followed me the entire 3 hours all the way back to my house. This was almost 4 years ago. Since then, I have gotten numerous blocked calls from payphones, but most importantly, various fake Facebook accounts, all from him. Ah yes, now the juicy parts, the messages. Before I proceed into this, I want to say that the phone calls and messages I received last year did not scare me enough to do any form of action. For the last 3 years up until tonight, I saw Fernando as harmless. Stupid, I know, so stupid. I honest to God saw Fernando as just a druggie whose brain was so fried, and saw him in a light that no sober mind could bring. Let me tell you, I was a naive, stupid teenager. I know I'm only shy of 20, but life experiences sure do change your outlook of things, and I really wish I saw things differently, even just a year ago. His attempts at reaching me was not a daily thing, nor something that distracted me from my normal life. These messages will not make much sense to you at all. Please keep in mind his brain does not work the way it should, and drugs have gotten to the best of them. Another thing I want to include is that I have never had any form of romantic or even physical relationship with this guy. Here are the messages Fernando sent to me a year ago. As you can see, he is very delusional. I'm not quite sure what is wrong with him. The dress comment was about a Facebook photo I had posted, so my ignorant self did not do anything other than post the screenshots on Twitter and have a good laugh. Since then, I wasn't really bothered by him too much, maybe a phone call from a payphone once in a while, but I was so busy with work at the time, I simply did not pay attention to him. I was dating a boy and my phone had fallen into a mop bucket at work, leading me to start using my grandmother's phone, as she never used it and insisted on me using it before I bought myself a new phone. I hadn't heard from Fernando in months, so of course he didn't even cross my mind. Through everything, he never was a huge red flag for me. I don't know why. Rewind to just this past January, I finally bought myself a new phone, meaning I was getting my previous number back. Not even 4 hours after reactivating my brand new iPhone, my phone rang. It was Fernando. Fast forward a few more blocked calls, a Twitter account, and here I am tonight, sitting in bed with my best friend. She brought up a conversation we were having about how we always received creepy messages from men trying to contact us, and I laughed and said I didn't receive those. She insisted I did, so we sat and looked on Facebook what desperate pervs were trying to get my attention. To my horror, 2 accounts with no profile picture and unusual names were at the top. My gut knew instantly. I clicked on the second to first. It was of course from Fernando. My best friend shrieked at the top conversation. 17 messages. I knew something was not right. I clicked, and boy do I wish I hadn't. These messages have officially assured me that I may not be safe. Maybe I never have been. These are the messages he sent me just a month ago. Please note the name has not been covered because that is not his real name, just another fake profile name he used to contact me. I would love to let out a sigh of relief after reading his last message to me, but Fernando has told me he will leave me alone countless times over the years, and it never lasted. I have never been concerned for my safety up until this point, as he has never gotten that descriptive. Something about his energy and his recent messages seem off, but I know it's him. I just don't know what his next move will be. The silence does not soothe me, it only scares me more. The scariest part? He followed me home 4 years ago. He knows where I live. So creepy drug addict stalker who was convinced we once dated, let's not meet again. Hey guys, thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join the Nightmare Army. I'm always looking for new soldiers in my Nightmare Nation. And now our soldiers have upgraded to 20,000 subscribers. Thank you all so much. You have no idea how happy I am to finally have reached that number. Thanks to all you guys. You guys are the best. And honestly, I'm kind of speechless about it too. I mean, I woke up this morning, or afternoon rather, and went on YouTube and saw that big 20K number. I was like, holy shit. 20,000 subscribers. I am going to faint. But if I do have to end this video on a good note, the best thing I could say is to say thank you to everybody that has helped me out. Killer Orange Cat, Blue Spooky, Rebecca Adams, Carlton Rudder, Your Maker, my parents, for Christ's sake. My parents have honestly been so supportive of this path that I've taken with YouTube. They're always helping me out. They're always giving me ideas for stories too. I mean, my dinner table has honestly turned into like scary stories talk, and my dad's always throwing ideas at me. My sister's always throwing ideas at me. My mom. It's honestly crazy. And I mean, my mom listens to my stories too all the time, and she's always like, oh, you're doing so good. I am very critical on myself all the time. As you guys can tell, I say sorry a lot. But I know there's still a bigger ladder to climb. I know there's more to improve in my videos, and I will continue to improve, and I will continue to climb up that ladder for you guys, because you guys are awesome, and I love you all. Again, thank you all so much. And by the way, guys, have you guys been playing Deus Ex Mankind Divided? Amazing ass game. Definitely check it out. Try this Adam Jensen impression. I never asked for this. Is that good? Bad? I don't know. I kept doing it all night last night to my friends. Every time they were like handing me stuff, I'm like, I never asked for this. Anyways, guys, again, thank you all for watching. And just remember, the best ideas always come out of nightmares.